Welcome back to the third instalment of our CT Brief Honest Conversations mini-series on complaints handling. Here, Catherine and Sue discuss key changes in the Complaints Handling Code, emphasising a shift from should to must and the code's new statutory status.
The Housing Ombudsman issued the new Complaints Handling Code, which was launched after quite extensive consultation with landlords and others. And so I just wanted to ask you, Catherine, what do you think are the main changes that this represents, the new code?
I think the first thing, Sue, is a bit of a shift in tone. And I know you've done a bit of quick analysis looking at the change from should to must. That, to me, sums up the main changes, actually. And, of course, that reflects the statutory status of the Complaints Handling Code now. There are a lot of clarifications. One of the most interesting ones I saw was a kind of clarification around this issue of, is it a service request or is it a complaint? And there's been this ongoing conversation, I think, with some landlords around, well, it's a service request, they just want it sorted, versus we need to investigate, it's a complaint. I think that's a bit of a false distinction, and the Ombudsman has really clarified that in this version of the code. So a service request is not necessarily a complaint. However, should someone make a service request and then not be happy with the outcome, that absolutely is a complaint, whether or not the tenant specifically asked to lodge a formal complaint. So I think I take that to mean someone rings up and says, you didn't turn up to fix my window this morning. OK, put it right, service request. They ring up again and say, and the guy was really rude to me, or the girl was really rude to me when they turned up. That's a complaint. And that's very clear now in the Complaints Handling Code. It was already in there. And what's interesting is the fact the Ombudsman's felt the need to clarify it further. So there's a lot more clarity around the expectations of people being able to access the process, and being, no doubt, really clear expectations around putting into action any reasonable adjustments. It's not enough to have a policy. It's around how you use that in practice to make sure that access to the complaint service is fair, and also people are getting equitable service outcomes, which, of course, is a theme in the new consumer standards we're expecting to see. I think there's more around unacceptable behaviours, and I stress the word behaviours because the Ombudsman's really clear. The behaviour of a complainant may be unreasonable. It's not about labelling the person, it's about labelling the behaviours and saying this is unacceptable and this is how we're going to deal with it. So there's more clarity around that, and some absolute, crystal clear clarity in what's now 6.9, which basically sets out your stage 1 investigation letter for you. It says, here are the headings. This is what to include. It's very clear. There are changes in terms of complaints exclusions. You can no longer exclude complaints due to time unless they're over 12 months old instead of 6. There's confirmation that you need to investigate and reply to a complaint within 10 days of acknowledgement, not receipt of the complaint, which will, I imagine, give a bit of a sigh of relief to landlords dealing with quite a volume of complaints. The third stage of the process has already gone. It's now completely unacceptable under any circumstances. And in terms of remedies, there's much more clarity that the Ombudsman wants landlords to look at the Housing Ombudsman's own guidance to get some consistency, I suppose, across the sector. But the biggest change, so far as I can see, is the duty of the Ombudsman to monitor compliance with the code, which is now on a statutory footing. And as such, they are requiring all landlords registered to make an annual return of their self-assessment with the code. That includes smaller providers, albeit with a slightly different timescale. And I suppose when I saw that, I thought, gosh, the Housing Ombudsman must have had regard to what that means for individual landlords in terms of where their attention's going, but also the resource at the Ombudsman. Yeah. Have you got any thoughts about that, Sue?
I guess I felt that, as often with compliance things, there's a discipline of self-assessment which is really helpful, I think, for landlords to go through a process and say, well, we think we comply with this code, but let's just go through and check every single stage and make sure that we do. So that, I think, is a really useful and a process that adds value. The actual resulting self-assessment itself could be extremely dull. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. So for me, it's more the discipline in the process than the actual, a list which says yes, 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 yes. I think I think it's the discipline and the assurance that comes with that. And I also think the real richness will come from understanding the Housing Ombudsman's data, compliance with this code, and then the tenant satisfaction metrics, which are coming in on a very similar timetable. So I think the real richness will come from how those two sets of data interact. So I'm really looking forward to being able to cross-reference those in publicly available information. So that's going to be fascinating, really.
And we're doing quite a lot of work with housing associations and local authorities as they grapple with the self-assessments around the complaints code, and also really get to grips with consumer standards. I feel the two are really closely related. So I think it can feel like quite challenging times for registered providers at the moment, but doubtless we're looking at an approach that's going to result in better outcomes for tenants.
Thank you for listening to our mini-series. We hope you've enjoyed it and found it insightful. There is an upcoming online masterclass on navigating the updated consumer standards on the 14th of March at 10 a.m. To find out more, visit campbelltickell.com/events. If you can't attend, a recording will be made available on our website and YouTube channel. To discuss any issues raised in the podcast, please feel free to email comms@campbelltickell.com.